So guys, what if Naruto was walks between light and darkness and Koneko a slave movie? Who is this? Questioned a young blonde boy who seemed to be around 10 years of age with cerulean blue eyes. He looked at the nun that sat beside him on his bed. She had golden blonde hair and beautiful green eyes. That is my daughter. I was forced to leave her behind in Italy due to certain circumstances. She seemed downtrodden at that. She worried about her fellow blonde beside her. Would he hate her for abandoning her own daughter? Would he scorn her? She was holding back tears as she waited for her companion to respond. It's okay. The child said cheerfully, I know you won't abandon her without being forced to. You are too kind for that and love children so much that you would never be evil enough to leave her behind. She turned and saw that megawatt, fox-like grin he always gave that cheered her up. Thank you, she said softly. She stood up and ruffled his hair. Now, how about I go and get dinner started? Go freshen up and come down to help, won't you? He nodded quite rapidly as the nun left his room. The blonde put the picture down on the nightstand next to his bed and went to his door. When he opened it, he was met with a sight that made him want to vomit. The other orphans littered the hallway, blood was everywhere. Then he heard a scream from down the hall. It sounded like the nun that was just in his room. Without hesitation, he ran down the hall. He never noticed a pair of red glowing eyes watching him from the opposite direction that he ran from. As he ran down the hallway, he never got any closer to the destination where he heard the scream come from. The hallway seemed to go on forever as if it was some kind of illusion. After what seemed like minutes of running, he came to the sight that made him stop in fear. He saw a man with a deranged look on his face as he held the nun that was with him moments ago against the wall, her dress torn, revealing her underwear. The man had white hair and smiled in a creepy demeanor. He held a sword in his right hand. He held the tip pressed against the nun's bra, threatening to tear through the article of clothing. You are much more pleasing to look at than the old prunes that I slaughtered downstairs. The man gloated as if she would bask in his accomplishment. I can actually get some enjoyment out of you. The blonde was furious that this man was going to hurt the only person who got to know him and didn't ignore him in the entire orphanage. His eyes flashed to a glowing red for a brief moment before turning back to his cerulean blue. Hey! He yelled, leave her alone. She didn't do anything to you or anyone. The white-haired man stopped his sword from cutting the nun's bra. He turned his head and glared at the young child yelling at him. The nun saw the look in his eye and feared for the young blonde's life. Run. Leave me here. Please. Just run away and find help. The child looked at the nun and contemplated doing what she said, but stood strong in his spot. He wasn't going to run away and hide this time. Look at you trying to be the hero. What are you gonna do? Spit on me and scratch me? The man laughed maniacally. You're just a kid who is way over his head. He'll show you how powerless you are. He raised his sword back up to the nun, but placed the tip at her heart. I was gonna have fun with you, but the little shit put me in a bad mood. No hard feelings, okay? Before either of the blondes could register his words, he plunged the sword through her heart and removed the hand holding her up against the wall. He then pushed the sword deeper so it pierced through the wall. He let go of the sword and saw it held the nun suspended in the air. After seeing his work, he pulled out a small dagger from behind his back and started to walk to the child. The nun coughed up blood and winced in pain. She could feel herself dying. She didn't have more than a handful of seconds left. She turned to the child who hid his face in a mask of horror. She smiled at the child. This isn't your fault, you hear me? The blonde looked at her as tears fell down his face. Do not blame yourself for this, you hear me? You did nothing wrong. She coughed up more blood as the man was feet away from the kid. Before I go, I want to tell you something, she choked out. I want you to find my daughter, find her, and let her know that I loved her, and I want you to look after her, be her big brother and protect her. He nodded as the tears flowed down his face. She gave him a loving smile. After all, I love you like my son, Naruto, as she finished those words. The light faded from her eyes, but she never lost that motherly smile on her face. Fish cake. Naruto turned to look at the man who just murdered his surrogate mother. What a stupid name. The man boisterously laughed. Shut up. Naruto glared at the man. It means maelstrom. I bet your name is terrible. Oh. Quite the spunk in you, kid. The man grabbed Naruto by the shirt and pinned him against the wall. My name is Fried, by the way, Fried Selson, remember it, kid? He brought the dagger to his cheek and carved a straight line horizontally. Remember the day that you were completely worthless and watched the people you care about die due to your weakness. Naruto screamed in pain as Fried continued to carve 5 more horizontal lines into Naruto's cheeks, 3 on each cheek. Ha! You look like a fox. The sounds of sirens caught Fried's attention. He sighed as he dropped Naruto on the floor. Oh well, it was fun while it lasted. He removed the sword that held the nun against the wall and watched as her lifeless body fell to the floor. He walked away into the hallway, the darkness enveloping his frame. Don't you forget about me, Whiskers. Naruto stared at the man disappear into the darkness of the hallway before his eyes threatened to close. His body swayed as he struggled to stay standing. He looked at the dead nun who had been a mother to him in his short time at the orphanage. He then saw a brief image of another woman in almost the same condition with red hair and a man with blonde hair laying beside her. Mom, Dad. His body then started to fall to the floor from exhaustion. Ah. A teenager yelled as he bolted up in bed. He clutched his chest as he felt his heartbeat rapidly. He was drenched in sweat as he was breathing rapidly. He took a few deep breaths to collect himself. That dream again, he sighed when he calmed down. He got up and went to the restroom. He looked in the mirror and looked at himself. For being 17 years of age, he would say he grew quite well. He was tall for his age, standing at a height of 5 feet 7 inches, taller than those his age by a good few inches. His blonde hair was a bit long in the front, 2 small bangs starting to frame his forehead. Blue eyes stared back into his. He scanned his face, and to him, he would say he was quite handsome. Now, he was no narcissist, but when you constantly hear the female population talk about how handsome you were, you kind of just accept it. They even said the whiskers added to his rugged charm. His whiskers. He looked down at the thought of them. They are a dark reminder of his past and the person he loved as his own mother. Tracing them, he could feel the sting from when he got them and hear the mocking voice of that man, Fried's voice. He knew that the cops never caught him, but he was brought in for questioning anyway. He told them what he saw and remembered, but eventually there was nothing they could do. There was no one with that description in their records. Fried just vanished. He shook his head of those thoughts. No need to get distraught over the past. He went back to his room and got changed into his school uniform. He wore a burnt orange shirt with a black Kuo Academy blazer over it. He had on the black Academy pants along with a pair of black shoes with white laces and trim. He ran his hand through his hair before leaving his home. As he walked out the front gates, he turned around to look at his home. It was a flat, much like the ones from Europe. It had a living room and kitchen downstairs with one bathroom, and the second story contained the master bedroom with its own bathroom. Nothing fancy, but it was his, and he was happy to have it over his old life in the orphanage. As he walked down the road towards the school, he saw the rest of the buildings much like his own. It wasn't strange considering the new owner of the school was from Europe and built these homes for the students attending Kuo Academy on scholarships. That was correct. Naruto was attending Kuo Academy off of a scholarship. There was no way he would have been able to afford to attend the recently turned co-ed Kuo Academy. It was only through rigorous studying that he was able to attend because of an academic scholarship. Thanks to his habits he built while he was with a nun, he knew how hard work could pay off in the very end. He was actually confronted by the man who took ownership of Kuo Academy. He was a man to look in his late 20s, early 30s. He had crimson red hair along with a goatee to match. His name was Zeodicus, if Naruto recalled, Zeodicus Gremory. Father of Rias Gremory, one of Naruto's best friends. Naruto frowned as he thought of Rias and his friends. He had met Rias a week after he started attending Kuo. He wouldn't lie to himself, he was entranced by her beauty. Sure, she had an amazing body, but that wasn't what captivated him. What captured his attention was her crimson hair. It seemed that he shared his father's fondness of red hair. She had approached him one day, asking him if he was native to Japan, given his blonde hair, as blonde hair in Japan usually meant one was a troublemaker. Naruto was slightly offended by this comment, but didn't take it personally and just told her that his hair was naturally blonde from his father. After telling her that his hair was natural, they then started to get to know one another. Rias even brought him to her club, the Occult Research Club. There he met Akeno Himejima, a very flirtatious woman who Naruto just got the feeling she was a sadist, but he didn't care as she was a kind person at heart, and that was all that mattered. The strange thing is when he is talking to Akeno, it would seem Rias would get upset with her and then try to take his attention away from her. He also met the school mascot, as people called her, Koneko Taoju. She was a very petite girl who enjoyed sweets and was able to sniff out the Pocky that he had in his bag. He ended up giving it to her, since he really didn't feel like eating it. Ever since then, he made sure to bring the girl sweets, just to see the cute expression she made when she ate said sweets. Plus she had a tendency to like his presence and sat on his lap when she had a chance, more in the sense that she got jealous when he was talking to Rias and Akeno, and she wanted his attention to herself. He could honestly say that he had some sort of feelings for each of the girls. He knew what the feeling was, he just couldn't choose one over the other two. To him they were also special, and he loved them to death. However, it was not only the women of the group that he got to know. There was the other resident blonde that Naruto met, Kiba. He was the very definition of a pretty boy. He was considered the prince of Kuo. Naruto didn't care for titles and got along with Kiba. They shared an interest in swords and fighting. They had a bit of a sparring match, and while he won he knew that he was holding back something when they are fighting. He enjoyed his time with someone he considered his best friend outside of Rias and the other girls. Naruto was really great friends with all of them, and they would always hang out together. But that changed recently. It seemed as if they were busy with their club activities that they couldn't hang out with him. This had started about a month ago, but he didn't mind much as being in a club was a requirement for the school. But she still needed to find a club to join. He had offers from some of the clubs on campus, but he saw the looks in their eyes and knew that their intentions were more of a lust variety instead of a honest wanting him for the club itself. He cleared his head as he entered the front gates of the academy. He would visit them after school and surprise them. I mean, it is a Friday so they should be free after school, Naruto thought. He never heard a resident pervert talking about a date he had later today. Naruto made his way to his class as the bell rung. Underworld. Are you sure you want me there? She is nearly an adult now. I have no reason to doubt her capabilities in dealing with a few low-tier fallen angels, Grafia told Surziches as they were currently in his office. Surziches just sat at his desk as he stared back at his maid who was also his wife. I know Grafia, and I believe in her abilities also. Hell, Sona is there also, so if these rumors are to be true, they would have little to no issues. Surziches sighed as he ran his hand through his hair. But I can't shake this feeling that something big is going to happen tonight. I want you there to make sure this doesn't cause another war or break the treaty we have. He stood up and walked up to Grafia and took her hands into his. Please, just watch over my little sister. I trust you, and only you to fulfill this mission, Surziches said. It is the reason why I married you after all, he finished with a goofy smile. Grafia shook her head as he showed his childish attitude once again. As you wish, Lord Lucifer, she smirked a little as she saw him drop his head in a childlike manner at her calling him Lucifer instead of Surziches. Surziches froze as he felt a pair of lips press onto his forehead. When he looked up he saw Grafia had her emotionless facade on, but he saw the mischievous glint in her eyes before she teleported. That woman. Surzich turned back to his desk and saw the paperwork got bigger and cried. How in hell is this possible? It grew when I turned away. Earth. Naruto made his way over to the orc room as school had just ended. He was smiling to himself as he thought of hanging out with his friends again. Naruto went to open the door leading to the room that they hung out in the orc, but stopped as he heard his name. What about Naruto? He heard Koneko ask. Naruto froze. What about me? He thought. He heard Ria's sigh. Naruto is a great guy and all, but he doesn't have anything that makes him special. I thought I sensed something special within him, but he must have just been in contact with someone who was. Ria said. No, instead Issei will be joining us as our new member. That pervert. Naruto thought. What was so special about him that they wanted him join the orc? He had seen Issei and his friends around campus and knew nothing good could come from them, especially Issei, since he seemed to be the most adamant in the fact he was only having a harem in his mind. This annoyed him since he was shouting him at times, and this led to him being targeted for it. So what the hell made that jackass so special they chose someone they never spoke to or gave the time of day to compare to him? Pervert, I still want Naruto, Koneko stated blandly, though Naruto could hear the slightly angry tone in her voice that Ria's didn't catch. He smiled as at least Koneko seemed to care for him. Ara, seems like you are quick to judge, Koneko, came the voice of a certain ebony-haired sadist. Besides, nothing wrong with being a little perverted. Naruto deadpanned at her statement. She was a pervert herself. He knew for the lustful comments she made all the time. Well, he didn't like passing judgment. The boy proved that he is one, and that was his only redeeming, if you could call it that, quality in his mind. But Naruto would commend him with being honest with himself and not caring what others thought, but still. Shouting you want to be harem king when 90% of the school is female. That doesn't matter. What does matter is Issei. He is to join the orc, so we can just forget about Naruto. He isn't important. That broke him. Just like that, they cast him aside. Naruto turned away from the door and made his way to leave the school. Tears fell from his face as he walked away from the school. He would never hear what was going on at the door after she had stated this comment. What would Naruto think if he heard you say that? Akeno said with a frown on her face. It sounded like you are over Naruto and want nothing to do with him. Koneko looked at her king and frowned. Is her king really that selfish, or had she missed this during her time serving her? If so, she was going to go to Naruto and tell him how she felt, and when she becomes a high-class devil, she would bring him into her own peerage. What? Koneko hates open perverts that are not perverse with everyone that passes them. Nothing she said meant you can't be perverted for the one you love. Riaz looked at them puzzled before she thought about what she said. Her eyes widened in horror as she recalled her words. You know I didn't mean it like that, Koneko. Riaz exclaimed. I could never do that to him. She turned around as she clutched her hand near her chest. After all, I care for him as much as you two do, she said softly. It was true, all three of them held feelings for the blonde. He was just so charismatic and had this aura that made you want to get closer to him. The only reason they had not confessed to Naruto was the problem with Rizer. Riaz needed to focus on getting out of the contract, along with her fellow peerage members. Plus they feared what would happen if he came into the picture and saw him and killed Naruto. That thought killed them, and they knew that no one would bat an eye at it. Well, her brother would, considering that was someone she cared about, but she would not use Naruto as a bargaining chip in this case for her freedom for his life. That was also the case with Kiba as he refrained from asking Tsubaki, Sona's queen, out on dates as he wanted to focus on helping his king. Once this riser situation was resolved, she along with Akeno and Koneko would confess to Naruto about everything, even if he was just a normal human. Little did Rias know both Akeno and Koneko would fight to become high-class devils and bring him into their peerages to spend eternity with him. Their love ran so deep that they would willingly let him know they were devils just to be with him. Rias stared at Koneko. I want you to trail Issei and let me know where they are headed to, I will then have my familiar show up and give him a summoning paper. Koneko nodded as she left the room. Rias turned to look out the window and thought of a certain blonde-haired male. Never realizing the pain that went through said blonde's heart and mind. Park. Naruto was currently lying in the grass of the park near his home. After hearing the words from Rias that he wasn't important and was nobody special, he needed to clear his head. It hurt him to hear that from a girl he loved and thought of as his best friend. So he went to the one place that always calmed his mind, the park. It wasn't necessarily the park though, anywhere that had an abundance of nature, like a garden, would calm his mind. It seemed to always calm his mind, as if the trees and plants tried to talk to him. Naruto looked to the sky and saw it was already late, the sun was nearly gone as he could make out a few stars. He got up into a sitting position before he stood up. Moping and sulking about it wouldn't help him, but he couldn't deny this trip to the park didn't help ease his hurting heart and mind. Naruto then began to walk along the path to head home. He could see the fountain from where he was lying on the grass. Naruto stopped walking as he saw some sort of transparent barrier form around him and the fountain. Ah! Naruto heard a blood-curdling scream from the other side of the fountain. He ran to the other side and saw a sight that made him gasp. Issei was lying down on the ground with a spear that was made of light piercing his stomach, a pool of blood oozed around him, and he saw Issei trying to remove the spear. Naruto made a move to try and help the perverted teen, but a voice stopped him. And what do we have here? A handsome blonde, Naruto turned around and saw a beautiful woman in some type of dominatrix outfit. Now, why couldn't I be able to watch over someone as handsome as you? I could have sure had some fun with you. Naruto didn't have time to respond as he was thrown back from a viscous kick from the woman. He was sent flying off the path behind trees and bushes, where he wasn't able to see Issei anymore. He slowly pushed himself into a seated position as he saw the woman come flying towards him with her black wings. I'm sorry that I have to kill you, but I can't have any witnesses, she stated. Name's Rainer by the way, just thought it would be appropriate for you to know my name before you perished. He saw her bring her arm back and form a spear like the one that was embedded in Issei. He saw it near him as she threw it at him. Naruto saw it come at him as if in slow motion. Was this it? Is this how he died? In the middle of the park to some perverted woman? What about Rias, Akeno, and Koneko? Yeah, they hurt him, but there was still that feeling there, even through the harsh words. He still loved them, he still needed to tell them that even if they rejected him. And now he was gonna die because he was weak, just like all those other times, his parents, the nun and orphans at the orphanage. Why was he always so weak? Why could he never protect himself? Power is what you desire. Then let your emotions out and use them to fuel your soul and fight. Naruto heard a voice, but didn't know from where. Embrace the hate, the anger, the love that you feel. Accept it and unlock all your hidden power that was locked away. His anger, he was angry that he was rejected by Rias for some degenerate pervert who only lived to see a pair of breasts. His hate, he hated himself for being so weak. He just sat by and watched all his loved ones killed before his eyes over and over again. He hated it. And his love, despite him being angry at Rias and her club, he still loved them, and the people who died before him, they still loved him till their very last breath, even as they were killed, they loved him to the very end. He was through being weak. Rainer watched with some amount of pity in her eyes. The blonde did seem like a kind soul. Was it hypocritical of her given her status as a fallen angel? Of course it was, but she was still part angel nevertheless. She wasn't crazy like her partner, Donaseek, but this kid just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was shook from her thoughts as she felt a mass amount of energy being released. She focused back on the blonde and saw the spear nearing his sitting form. Just before it struck, he reached his left hand up and caught the spear. Even for humans, light spears still burned them, but this human just caught it like it was nothing. That is when she saw it, his arm was covered in light magic. She smiled, seems this would be a lot more fun than she originally thought. She froze however when Naruto looked up at her. His once blue eyes were now a deep blood red. She got over her fear and charged at him with another spear in her hands. She went to slash at him, but he rolled out of the way and kicked her in the jaw. Naruto stood up and stared at the fallen angel. Rainer rubbed her jaw. His kick certainly hurt for a human. Rainer decided to quit playing around and took this serious. Rainer flew at him once again and slashed him across his chest, this time much faster. Naruto was quick to dodge, but was still cut across his shoulder. He however never let out a grunt in pain. He had to do a backflip to avoid a spear that was thrown at him. He looked up and saw Rainer flying above him with a scowl on her face. She was pissed. How was this human able to evade her blows? Sure, she only had one set of wings, but this was merely a human with a sacred gear that he just awakened. She narrowed her eyes as she looked at his form. She could see he was starting to breath hard and his knees were shaking. She let out a laugh in amusement. It seems like you can't handle the strain of your sacred gear yet. Naruto narrowed his eyes at her now. They began to flash from red to blue. It was amusing fighting you, however short it was. Rainer disappeared from his sight as his eyes became their original blue once again. He gasped as he felt pain across his lower abdomen. He collapsed on his chest and looked to the side. He nearly vomited at the sight. He saw what appeared to be his legs and part of his stomach laying beside him. He tried to move his legs, but he felt no movement at all. She bisected him in half. He looked up and saw Rainer standing there with a smirk on her face. Sorry about this, but you just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. She then took off to the sky and flew away. Naruto remained silent as he coughed up a copious amount of blood. He lay there as he thought about his life, his family and those he loved. I guess I was weak in the end, he thought sadly, as he could see his blood pool around him. He was able to see the prone form of Issei through the bushes. It seemed as if he was still struggling to get up. He then saw some sort red runic circle appear next to the boy. His eyes shot open as he saw Rias appear out of it. He saw her take something out of her pocket and lay it across the boy's chest. He heard her say something, but he didn't care. He needed to call out to her, make it to her. He tried calling out her name, but his lungs were filled with blood. He tried to crawl, but only felt his left arm move. He looked to his right arm and saw it was missing. He ignored it as he tried to crawl with one arm to her. He managed to move a few inches before all the strength left his body. He watched with half-lidded eyes as he saw her disappear with Issei in her arms in another circle like the one she came from when she arrived. He let a tear fall as he closed his eyes. The last thing he saw was a beautiful woman with silver hair lean down to him before he saw black. He didn't know where he was, just darkness surrounded him. He could not see anything besides his own body parts, which was weird since he could have sworn that perverted crow had separated his legs and arm from his body. Grafia, are you sure this is what you want? He turned his head frantically at the sound of a voice. Grafia. Who was that? Yes, I can sense something within him. He is special. That word again. Special. He reminded me of our son. That caught him off guard. He was murdered, yet he still held this air of innocence that I see in Milika's, as if no matter what challenges you put him through, he would still march forward. I could leave him there. Naruto smiled a bit. Some random stranger decided to help him out. I understand, Grafia. Even still, he may be your queen, but he is still dying. He lost too much blood for even the evil P system to fully heal him. Naruto looked down. Just his luck, even when someone saved him, he still would die. What about a blood transfusion? He could survive if he was to be given blood, would he not? He'll do it. He'll give him as much blood as he needs to survive. Naruto was surprised by the desperation in the woman's voice. It sounded like she was trying her hardest to save him. Grafia. You know how risky that is. He may be a devil and your queen, but his body could still reject your blood. Plus, if his body was to accept your blood, it would change him. His body would make your blood his, making him a lucifuge. He would be an outcast even among other pureblood devils if they find out how he was created or born in this case. Are you sure this is what you want? Was it true? Would he become this woman's brother in a sense if he accepted her blood? Yes, I know he is my servant, so it is my duty to protect him. Servant, just a fancy word for slave. But I see him as much more. I see how you are with your sister. I never had a sibling to dote on. I could with your younger sibling as we are married, but this is different, and he could be the big brother that Milika's always wanted. I would trust this young man with my life. I don't know what it is, but I can feel like he is just a broken soul wanting to feel love. I can provide that for him. Naruto could feel tears fall from his face. This woman was willing to go so far for a stranger. He would make sure he gave her his thanks. Very well, we will begin the procedure, and Grafia, I'm glad that I have someone so kind and loving as you as my wife. Naruto smiled at that. They seemed to really care for one another. Naruto wiped his tears as he wandered around in the darkness some more. That's when he saw them, the red eyes watching his every move. He doesn't know what compelled him to walk to the pair of glowing eyes, but he did. As he approached them, he saw the darkness began to brighten up until he was able to see the owner of the red eyes. There stood a tall man at about 6 feet 4 inches. He had blonde hair similar to his own and even shared the same facial structure as he did. If Naruto didn't know any better, he would say that he was staring at an older version of himself. Nice to meet you, Naruto. The man spoke in a much more mature voice than Naruto's. Who are you? And how do you know me? Naruto questioned on edge of who this man was. The Naruto look-alike just let out a hearty laugh. Of course, where are my manners? He said as he stopped laughing. My name is How, and as for as how I know you, he paused as he looked at Naruto in the eye. It would be rude of me not to know who my own descendant was. 3 days later. Rias looked as if she hadn't slept in days, and you would be right. It had been 3 days since she turned Issei into a devil. It had also been 3 days since Naruto had gone missing. She had took Issei home and left his body to naturally heal overnight, as his devil healing would heal a simple wound such as a spear through his abdomen. She had then went over to Naruto's home to see if he wanted to hang out for the night, to make up for her ignoring him for the past weeks, plus she had the new series known as Overlord and wanted to see if he wanted to watch her anime. Yes, he knew about her obsession with Japanese stuff and didn't judge her for it, and even offered to watch any of the series with her if she ever wanted to. This made her heart flutter, and this incident made her heart grow for him. When she had went to his house, she sensed something was wrong. She didn't knock as she had kicked the door down. When she looked inside, she saw a plain-looking living room. That was bad. Naruto had the place littered with ramen cups and books. The room was spotless, devoid of anything that belonged to the blonde. She ran up to his room and looked through his drawers and closet. Not a single piece of clothing lay there. As she went back downstairs, she saw something that filled her with dread and guilt. Black feathers rested on top of the coffee table in the living room. Was this her fault? Did the fallen attack Naruto due to her hanging around him? Did she cause him to die? No. He wasn't dead. That is what she told herself at least over the past 3 days. She was interrupted when Akeno and Koneko walked through the door. She turned to them and gave them a hopeful look. If the way Koneko looked to the side and Akeno shook her head, there was only one answer. What did I do? Rias muttered as she collapsed to the ground in tears. Akeno rushed to her side as Koneko stood there clenching her fist. It isn't your fault, Rias, we would have never known this would have happened, Akeno tried to soothe her king. But it is Akeno. If I never approached him, then he would have never been involved in the supernatural world. If I never brought him here, I wouldn't have caused the one we loved to die. Rias wept, she let it all out. Akeno didn't offer any words of comfort as she joined Rias in weeping. The one boy, no man, who could capture the sadist's heart was gone. Koneko just walked out the room in silent rage. Naruto wasn't dead, there was no way he could have. And the white-haired girl would find him. She was going to find him and bring him home no matter what. She already lost her family once, she was not going to lose someone that meant the world to her. Little did they know the boy they loved would return, but not like they hoped, and he would become something greater than anything the world has seen. The hands of fate have turned, and the world would be shaken to its core. Thanks.